I wasn't supposed to be out that far. That's the first thing I need to say. Because every bad decision after that started with me thinking, it's fine. I know these woods. I've hunted them on and off for years. I know the pull-offs. I know where the game trails braid together. I know which ridges get windswept and which pockets just stay cold all day. My usual spot had two trucks parked at the entrance and fresh boot prints going in. I don't share a section during rifle season. Not because I'm territorial, but because I like going home. So I drove deeper, took a logging road I'd never really bothered with before, and parked where the service got thin. I started walking and kept doing so until the quiet just felt right. The day started normal. The kind of normal you don't really appreciate until it's gone. From the frost on the low grass to the faint smell of sap when the sun hit the pines, my breath hanging in the air in front of me from the cold, squirrels making a big deal out of nothing, and even the occasional distant tap of a woodpecker sounding almost like a metronome. I was working along a shallow draw when I saw the first sign that something was off. It wasn't tracks, it was trash. Bright, wrong-colored trash that didn't belong in these woods. Crushed energy drink can, a torn granola bar wrapper snagged on a branch. Little strip of duct tape stuck to a leaf like someone had tried to patch something in a hurry. At first, I was angry. I thought, idiots, people do this every season. They treat the woods like a backdrop and then leave their entire life behind littered on the ground when they got bored. Then I saw the tent. It was tucked back in a little clearing between two leaning pines, far enough from the trail that you really wouldn't stumble into it unless you were paying attention or you were already looking for it. The tent itself was half collapsed, the poles snapped, and the rainfly bunched and twisted, like someone had grabbed it and yanked. Sleeping bags were dragged out onto the ground, unrolled and muddy, like the people inside never got the chance to pack. But I didn't see anybody. There were no people in the clearing. I stopped at the edge and let my eyes do a slow sweep before my feet would move into the scene. The cooler lid was open, but the food was untouched. Camp chair tipped over, but the stove was still neatly placed on a flat rock, almost like whoever set it up cared about it being level. A lantern on its side, but the glass unshattered like it was just placed there. I saw the small remnants of a fire ringed with half-burnt wood, and it was stacked as if it had been arranged and then abandoned mid-thought. The whole thing looked ransacked, but not looted. It's like someone had been in a hurry, like someone made this mess with a purpose. I stepped in, careful where I put my boots. I didn't want to stomp all over whatever was left of the story here. A phone lay near the tent door, face down, and when I picked it up, I could see the screen was spiderwebbed with cracks. Next to it was a small pile of stuff you'd find in people's pockets. Keys, a lighter, a folded map. The kind of things you drop when your hands stop working the way they're supposed to. "Hey!" I called, loud enough that it should have bounced. Nothing answered. I moved closer and crouched near the tent, but I didn't touch anything. I just leaned in enough to see inside. I could see a sleeping pad still laid out, a backpack half unzipped with clothes spilling out. But that was it. No blood, no obvious sign of a struggle. That was until I saw the dirt at the tent mouth that just didn't look right. There were drag marks, yes. 2 long, parallel grooves leading out to the trees, like something heavy had been pulled away. And beside those, pressed deep into the damp soil, were hoof prints. At first glance, they looked like deer tracks. Split hoof, a teardrop shape, the usual kind of thing. Then I leaned in a little more, and my stomach did a drop. The hooves were wrong. One side of the split was deeper than the other, like the animal had been walking with uneven weight. And the edges of the prints weren't clean. There were faint ridges, almost like fingerprints. If fingerprints were crescent-shaped and belonged to something that had learned to press down deliberately. I told myself the mud was just cracking, or it was a tread of boot overlapping the track, or maybe the imprint of a broken branch. But my brain just wouldn't let it go. Because right at the end of one of the tracks, like a detail someone added on purpose, there was a thin line dragged through the dirt. A single, straight groove, like something had used the tip of a nail to make it. I stood up slowly, scanning the woods again. That's when I heard the rustling. Right in front of me, in the brush on the far edge of the clearing. At first, it was too soft, the leaves shifting, a twig bending under weight. Then it stopped, and I realized I wasn't hearing random movement. I was hearing something that had moved and then waited. I raised my rifle and aimed low, not at the brush itself, but where something would step out if it decided to show itself. Hello? I said, and my voice sounded thin, scared. The brush moved again, and a deer stepped out. It was normal at first glance, a medium-sized doe, a thick winter coat. Its ears were forward, and its eyes were wide and glossy, and that way deer eyes are when they're trying to decide if you're dangerous or just something weird they found. It stood at the edge of the clearing and stared at me. That's not unusual. Deer freeze and then bolt. But this one didn't bolt. It held eye contact for too long. Not a couple seconds. Not 10 seconds. Long enough that I became aware of my own breathing. Long enough that I started to feel annoyed, like it was being the rude one. Then it took a step forward. Slow, measured. I kept my rifle up, but I didn't shoot. I'm not really proud of that looking back, but I couldn't make my hands do it. Something about the deer's stillness made it feel less like an animal and more like a person pretending to be one. It tilted its head slightly, almost curious. Then it blinked. And that blink was slow. Too slow. Like the skin had to think about how to close. I backed up one step, keeping my rifle on it. The deer didn't follow. It just watched me. My brain kept trying to force it into a normal box. Maybe it was sick. Maybe it had grown used to people. Maybe it was starving. But then I looked past it at the woods beyond. Between the trunks in that thin, shadowy space where distance turns into a blur, I saw something pale flash. A shape. Gone in an instant, like it had leaned out and then leaned back just as quick. I couldn't tell if it was a person. I couldn't tell if it was another animal. But the deer saw it too. Because the deer's eyes didn't move. The deer didn't flinch. It just kept staring at me, like it already knew what I was about to do next. I didn't like that one bit. I backed out of the clearing without turning my back fully, and then I did the thing I should have done the moment I saw the drag marks. I left. I didn't sprint, nor was I panicking. I just moved briskly through the trees until the clearing disappeared behind me. I told myself I'd get to my truck, get service, call it in as an abandoned campsite, let someone else with a uniform and a radio handle it. But I'd walked farther than I realized, and the terrain between me and the logging road wasn't a straight line. It was a mess of little ridges and deadfall and low spots that all looked the same when you weren't paying attention. By the time I hit the first recognizable marker, an old flag on a tree where someone had left a marker trail years ago, the light was already starting to slant. It wasn't dark, not yet, but that late afternoon angle, it made the woods look deeper. I checked my phone. No service. Of course. I kept walking anyway, trying to reverse my path, trying to stay calm, telling myself, just get back to the road. Worst case, you spend a cold night and walk out at first light. I've camped plenty. I always had a small tent in my pack, a little stove, a headlamp. Enough to make it a rough night, sure, but not a deadly one. It's not the idea of camping that scared me. It was the feeling that something had stepped into my route the moment I left that clearing. It started as little things. A soft crack behind me that stopped when I stopped. A bird exploding out of a tree, frantic, like something had startled it. Once, I even caught the faintest whiff of something sour and wet, like leaves left in a bag too long. Then it was gone, and I told myself it was just a patch of swampy ground. I didn't see the deer again, but I kept thinking about those hoof prints with the ridges, the nail-drag groove, the way the doe blinked like it was copying the movement. When I finally decided to set up camp, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because my internal compass, the one you don't realize you're using until it starts failing you, was beginning to slip. Every direction started to look plausible. Every tree looked like the last tree. Found a relatively flat spot on a slight rise, far away from thick brush, and started clearing the sticks off the ground. I kept my rifle close, and I set my headlamp up on a rock so it would throw light outward instead of blinding me. I moved quick, but not sloppy. The woods were quiet, in that way they get when the day animals settle down and the night ones haven't started yet. It was like a pause in time, like the forest itself was holding its breath. As I clipped the last corner of my tent, I heard it. A voice. Not close, but not far. Somewhere to my right, I think, beyond the trees.
Hey.
I froze. I didn't answer right away because I didn't trust my own ears. Then it came again, slightly louder.
Hey. Over here.
It sounded like a man, like someone trying not to scare me. Like someone choosing words very carefully. Every hair on my arm stood up, because I hadn't heard of any other hunters all day. No shots, no distant talking, nothing. The voice didn't carry the way voices do in the woods either. It didn't echo, it didn't bounce. It sounded forced, like it was coming through something that wasn't a throat. Who's there? I called. A pause. Then,
You can help me.
I'm not going into that brush, I said. If you're hurt, call out. I'll come to you if I can see you. Another pause. Then the voice softened, like it was trying a different angle.
I'm cold.
I stared into the trees, searching for movement, for a silhouette, for a flashlight beam. Nothing moved. There was no crunch of footsteps, just that voice. Then, behind me, there was a soft sound. A hoof on leaf litter. I turned. The doe stood at the edge of my campsite. It hadn't made a sound approaching, it was just there. My headlamp lit it in a clean circle of white light, and its coat from here looked darker and patched along its ribs, like it was damp. And despite the cold air, its breath didn't show. It stared at me. Up close, it looked even more normal, and yet somehow even more wrong. The proportions were right. The face was a deer face. But the stillness, it was deliberate. Deer don't stand like that. They flick, they fidget, they shift weight. This one held itself like it had been practicing. The voice from the trees said, sharper now,
Don't ignore me.
I didn't answer. I couldn't take my eyes off the doe. It took a step closer, then another. The rational part of my brain tried to shove itself forward. Don't let it get close to you. Don't touch it. Shoot it if it charges you. But my body did that stupid freeze thing again, where you're waiting for the moment you can explain it away. But that moment didn't come. The doe walked right up to the edge of my tent footprint. Close enough that I could see the texture of its nose, the damp shine on the nostrils, the little flecks of dirt at its mouth. It looked at my hands, then it looked back at my face, and it leaned forward, like it expected contact, like it wanted me to touch it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I was trying to prove to myself it was just a deer. Maybe because it felt easier to deal with an animal than a disembodied voice in the woods. I lowered my rifle and reached out. My fingers were inches from its forehead when I noticed the skin. At first, I thought it was the headlamp playing tricks. Headlamps, they can make fur look like it's moving when it isn't. But this wasn't an illusion. The deer's skin shifted. Not twitching like a muscle, it slid. Its skin was sliding along its form like something underneath was repositioning. The fur along its brow rippled, and for a second, the direction of the coat looked wrong, like it was running against itself. I stopped my hand midair. But the doe didn't flinch. It didn't pull back. It leaned in. The skin on its neck rolled under the fur like a thick knot traveling along a rope. I took a step back, but the doe followed, slow and deliberate. The voice from the trees, louder now, close enough to feel.
Don't.
One word, flat, commanding. I backed up again, my heel caught on a tent stake, and I stumbled. The doe's eyes stayed locked on mine, and the skin around its jawline bulged. The jaw stretched, not like a deer opening its mouth to bleat. It stretched like rubber. The corners of its mouth split slightly and then sealed again, as if the skin couldn't decide what shape it was supposed to hold. Then I heard a sound come from its throat. A wet click. My stomach dropped to my feet, and I brought my rifle up properly. "Back," I said. "Back!" The doe's head dipped. Its shoulders lifted, and the fur along its spine rose. And then it wasn't fur anymore. It separated into thin strands, peeling, revealing something pale and hairless beneath it. Skin was stretched too tight over ridges that hadn't been there a second ago. It was like watching something wear a deer from the inside and just realize it didn't fit. The front legs bent, the joints shifted, bones popped softly, muffled by flesh, sounding like knuckles cracking underwater. Its chest expanded and the deer stood taller, not rearing like an animal, standing like a person learning how to do so. The head stayed deer-shaped for a moment longer, eyes still fixed on me, and then the face began to change. The snout shortened, the mouth split wider, stretching sideways, exposing something dark and wet inside. Teeth slid into view, small at first, then longer, more numerous, like they were being pushed forward from behind. Then the voice in the trees whispered, close enough for it to brush against my ear.
He's right there.
I spun toward the sound, and that was the mistake. The thing, the not deer, hit me in a tackle. Not deer fast, heavy fast. A body thrown with hostile intent. It slammed into my chest and drove me backward into my tent. Poles snapping, fabric tearing, and my back hit the ground hard enough to knock the air out of me. My rifle went sideways. I lost grip on it for half a second. The thing's weight pinned my legs and its breath hit my face, hot, damp, wrong. It smelled like wet leaves left in a bag too long, like a swamp. It clicked again, wet and rapid, and lowered its face. Its mouth opened wide, too wide, and up close. The teeth weren't neat predator teeth. They looked grown and replaced over and over. Uneven lengths, some broken, some new. And then it bit at my shoulder. There was nothing but pressure first, then a tearing, blinding heat as I screamed and drove my elbow up into its throat. But it didn't grunt. It didn't yelp. It just adjusted. Like it wasn't surprised. I shoved the rifle barrel between us and pressed upward. Its teeth scraped the metal with a sound that made my own teeth hurt. It lifted its head, and for a split second, I saw what it had become. It was still deer-shaped in the broad sense, but it was beyond warped. Too long through the torso, too narrow at the hips, patches of coat hanging like a jacket that was half removed. And underneath was pale skin with darker mottling, like bruises hiding just under the surface. And the eyes, they were still deer eyes, which somehow made it worse. Because these weren't the wild eyes of an animal. They were attentive. It watched my hands. It watched the rifle. It watched where I was going to move next. The voice in the trees, calmer now. It said,
That's right.
I turned my head just enough to shout into the trees, "Who are you?" No answer. Not a footstep, not a laugh. But the not deer thing leaned down again. This time, I didn't freeze up. I fired. The shot was so loud in the tight trees, it felt like getting punched in the ears. The muzzle flash lit the canopy for a blink for a half second as the recoil slammed into my bitten shoulder and the pain almost made me pass out. The bullet hit the thing in the chest. I saw it. Dark fluid sprayed and spattering the torn tent fabric. But it didn't fall. It didn't fall. It jerked like something had startled it, then sprang off me with an angry click and landed on all fours, balanced and stared like it was offended. I scrambled backward out of the collapsed tent, boots slipping on torn fabric and leaves. My shoulder burned, warm blood running down my arm and soaking my sleeve.
Don't run.
I didn't listen. I got to my feet and ran anyway. No direction, no plan, just adrenaline and the certainty that staying meant to die. Branches whipped my face. My pack bounced and pulled at my shoulders. My injured shoulder screamed every time my arm moved. Behind me, I heard it move. It wasn't the sound of a deer bounding. It was something heavier, pushing through the brush with purpose. And I heard the clicking again. Fainter now, but more than one rhythm, like it was being answered. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs went numb. And then I tripped. I went down hard on a slope, rolled through leaves and hit something solid with my hip. Pain shot up my side as my rifle clattered a few feet away. I crawled for it, dragging myself with my good arm, as a shape moved between the trees ahead. The doe thing, the not deer, stepped into view. It wasn't fully upright now. It was hunched, spine arched wrong, like it had tried standing and decided it didn't need to. Its mouth hung slightly open and saliva dripped down in a slow, steady rhythm that truly matched no animal or creature I had ever known. Behind it, deeper in the trees, I saw the faint glow of my campsite light through trunks, a little beacon. The thing tilted its head towards it, then back to me, like it was deciding whether to finish me here or drag me back. I raised the rifle with shaking hands and aimed at its head, and for a moment, it just watched me. Then its skin rippled under the patchy coat and its face tightened. The mouth narrowed, the snout lengthened a hair, like it was trying to remember how to look harmless, like it was trying to become a deer again. My finger tightened on the trigger, and I fired. This time, the thing jerked sideways and vanished into the brush with a tearing crash. I didn't wait to see if it was wounded or pretending. I got up and ran downhill until I hit water. A creek, cold, fast, cutting through the woods. I splashed into it and followed it, letting the sound cover my movement, letting the water take my scent the way my grandfather taught me. Behind me, over the water, I heard rustling. More than one set, and the clicking came again. Multiple, faint, almost like a conversation. I kept moving until the trees thinned and I saw a strip of gravel road through the brush. A logging road. My truck was there exactly where I'd left it, like it didn't care what the woods did to people. I dragged myself out of the creek and stumbled to the driver's side. My hand shook so hard I dropped my keys once and had to grope around in the mud to find them. I finally managed to get the door open and climbed in. The heater blasted cold air in my face for a second before it warmed. I sat there breathing, shoulder throbbing, ears still ringing. Then I looked up. Across the road, between two trees, the doe stood watching. Normal again. Fur smooth, body right, the head tilted slightly. It stared at me for too long. And right before I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of there, I saw the skin along its neck ripple once under the fur. Not like an animal twitch, like something underneath was shifting into a better fit.